traditional view, which follows the biblical account, says that David and Solomon ruled a powerful kingdom in the 10th century BC.
King Solomon wasn't just a biblical figure, he was the ancient world's unrivaled genius. His reputation was so extraordinary that the Queen of Sheba undertook a 1,000-mile desert journey to test whether the legends of his wisdom and supernatural insight were real.
I have crossed the desert for many months to bathe in the ocean of his wisdom. I am Makeda, Queen of Sheba.
So when Grok AI stitched together scattered ancient fragments and revealed a single forbidden book written in Solomon's own hand, scholars panicked. This wasn't worship or myth, it was instruction, a dismantled blueprint of power he hid on purpose. And what it reveals is shocking. Solomon's cipher, Grok AI, and the blueprint that was never meant to be found. For generations, scholars chasing Solomonic lore traced faint trails of knowledge scattered across dusty, half-forgotten manuscripts. Clues hid in the Testament of Solomon, appeared in fragments of the Lesser Key, and lingered in arcane magical papyri, illegible marginal notes, and monastic archives sealed for lifetimes. Everyone assumed these were distant cousins, texts sharing themes, but not origin. Yet Grok AI detected patterns human eyes could not. Line by line, sigil by sigil, it linked obscure phrases and stylistic fingerprints like pieces of a cosmic jigsaw puzzle. Hebrew passages echoed patterns embedded in ancient Greek fragments. Aramaic scribbles matched Latin footnotes penned centuries later. Even damaged lines from sealed monastery vaults suddenly synced with medieval ciphers, once thought unrelated. Then came the Thunderbolt. These weren't separate works at all. Grok's cross-linguistic reconstruction revealed that every scattered fragment belonged to a single, original manuscript. One book, written by Solomon himself. A text deliberately dismantled, dispersed, encrypted, and hidden because of the power of what it contained. And the title wasn't metaphorical, poetic, or symbolic. It was blunt. It was called Forbidden. Why has this captured scholars' imaginations now? The life of King Solomon is, for one of the richest wells of inspiration and wisdom. It's easy to gloss over the complexities, but the story is layered with lust, strategy, triumph, and tragedy. Messy, magnetic, and endlessly captivating. It makes Game of Thrones feel like children squabbling over a cardboard throne. Rewind 3,000 years, past ruins, legends, and the dust that swallowed empires whole, and you arrive at a kingdom that, by all logic, should never have achieved such power. Israel under Solomon wasn't merely prosperous, it was a glittering anomaly. A tiny nation with influence so immense that its stories still pulse through the backbone of modern culture. Solomon inherited a united kingdom from his father, King David, and then performed the nearly impossible, elevating it to the peak of wealth, prestige, and spiritual authority. Ancient writers were not exaggerating when they described gold flowing like ordinary stones through Jerusalem's streets. Foreign rulers didn't just acknowledge Solomon, they observed him with a mix of awe, curiosity, and fear reserved for those who wield knowledge like a blade. They studied him, and in at least one famous instance, they traveled across continents to test him in person. The Queen of Sheba's legendary visit is far more than a charming diplomatic tale. It's a testament to Solomon's global power. She arrived with caravans brimming with treasure, spices, exotic artifacts, and perhaps a few hidden political agendas. Some traditions even whisper that she departed with something far more mystical, the Ark of the Covenant itself. Whether myth or memory, her visit underscores a truth we're only beginning to grasp. Solomon's world was drenched in secrets, a realm we once thought mostly mapped. Then Grok AI stepped in and quietly, decisively, rearranged what had been lost to history, obliterating everything we thought we knew. Most people know Solomon built the first temple. Few comprehend how impossibly ambitious that project would have been in the ancient world. The sheer scale of the stones, the precision of the architecture, the exotic materials sourced from far-off lands. It defied reason. Yet Grok's translation suggests Solomon didn't rely on human labor alone. He had a secret that's been hidden away for centuries until Grok stepped in. Most magical texts from antiquity are vague, poetic, or intentionally cryptic. Solomon's book, at least as Grok reconstructs it, is astonishingly different. It reads with the clarity of a technical manual. Human translators stumbled, constrained by time, culture, and the limits of language. But Grok wasn't. It unraveled connections across Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, Latin, Syriac, medieval substitution codes, and even the esoteric scribbles of monks trying to bury forbidden knowledge behind layers of symbolic camouflage. It recognized writing styles that spanned centuries. It matched encrypted passages with damaged lines from texts no scholar ever thought to compare. It rebuilt entire missing sections using linguistic probability engines trained on 10,000 years of humanity's written memory. In short, Grok solved a 3,000-year-old puzzle by doing the one thing humans were never built to accomplish, and what it uncovered rewired everything. Grok's translation suggests that Solomon's authority over spirits began with a gift, or perhaps a bargain, that appears nowhere in Scripture. The celestial ring that should never have been forged. Most legends paint Solomon as the wise king, the poet with divine insight, the architect of the temple, a figure polished to perfection by centuries of reverence. But the forbidden manuscript decoded by Grok AI sketches a version of Solomon that feels far stranger, far bolder, and far more unsettling than the stories we grew up hearing. In this account, Solomon is more than a king. He becomes the keeper of a celestial artifact, a ring. According to Grok's translation, the ring didn't pass through the hands of any earthly craftsman. It descended from the heavens itself, delivered by an archangel responding to a plea carved out of fear. During the early construction of the temple, everything looked normal under the sun. Workers carving stone, priests chanting blessings, architects debating sacred geometry. But once nightfall wrapped itself over the site, something entirely different stirred. A demon named Ornias crept into the project like a phantom saboteur, undoing progress with mischievous precision. Tools disappeared without a trace. Massive stones shifted as though nudged by invisible hands. Foundations that were stable at dusk cracked wide open by dawn. Workers spoke of bruises they couldn't explain, of whispers circling them in the dark, of shadows that seemed to breathe. Worst of all, a young laborer, barely beyond childhood, was singled out. Ornias drained his strength, pilfered half his wages, and, according to the manuscript's eeriest detail, fed on the boy's vitality through his right thumb. By the time this reached Solomon, terror had spread through the workforce like a plague. No decree, no wise counsel, no royal command could shield them from an enemy they couldn't see. So Solomon did the only thing left to do. He prayed like a man whose divinely assigned mission seemed on the verge of collapse. The answer came with frightening immediacy. The manuscript describes the archangel Michael appearing in a vision so intense Solomon nearly went limp. Forget the gentle imagery of glowing wings. This was radiance like molten metal and a voice that roared like thunder. In Michael's hand gleamed a golden ring carved with a symbol that matched no known language. It pulsed with a strange light, as if something trapped within was still alive. "Take this ring, Solomon, son of David," the archangel commanded. "Wear it, and thou shalt bind all demons, and by their labor the temple shall rise." A divine gift, yes, but the manuscript describes the moment with the tension of a contract whose hidden clauses promised consequences. When Solomon woke, the ring wasn't a mere memory. It glittered cold and real in his palm, and he wasted no time putting it to the test. He confronted Ornias directly, raised the ring, and spoke the demon's true name. Instantly, the creature manifested, dragged into visibility as though yanked by a celestial chain. Ornias, who had terrorized the workers for weeks, fell helpless. Solomon didn't appear afraid. Instead, he stood astonished at the sheer absolute force woven into the ring. What he did next teetered between genius and recklessness. He ordered Ornias to take the ring and use it to subdue another demon. And this is where the story shifts from simple supernatural encounter into something far more calculated. Solomon constructed a hierarchy using the demons themselves, like a darkly divine chain reaction. Each newly bound entity was commanded to capture another and another, until Solomon eventually stood before 72 spirits. He forced each one to reveal its name, its purpose, its weaknesses, the ruling angel assigned to restrain it, and the precise sigil that sealed its obedience. Then he put them to work. According to the forbidden manuscript, the demons lifted stones too heavy for any human enterprise, transported rare materials, shaped metals with unnatural precision, and contributed to architectural feats that shouldn't have been possible in the ancient world. And when they weren't laboring on the temple, Solomon interrogated them. They revealed the mysteries of alchemy, the location of hidden treasures, the medicinal nature of herbs, the paths traced by the stars, and even the invisible framework underpinning the universe itself. But the manuscript never lets the reader forget one thing. Power, especially forbidden power, always extracts its price. The ring elevated Solomon, but it also tempted him. There are passages hinting that he explored rituals outside the boundaries of the god who had given him the ring in the first place. Scholars suspect this is why the manuscript was ultimately suppressed, not simply because it described demonology, but because it portrayed a king drifting toward dangerous horizons, seduced by the intoxicating weight of cosmic authority. And then, as abruptly as it appeared in the narrative, the ring vanishes from history. Some traditions claim Solomon hid it before his death. Others say it was stolen during the fall of Jerusalem. More mystical circles insist it still exists somewhere, waiting dormant for someone daring or foolish enough to place it on their finger, which leads to the most tantalizing question of all, not merely how he commanded the demons, but what these 72 beings truly were in the first place. The dominion beyond sight. For most people, the word demon summons images of wild, misshapen horrors lurking in the dark, creatures that lash out with mindless malice or chaotic hunger. But according to the forbidden manuscript Grok AI managed to piece back together, Solomon didn't stumble into chaos at all. He stumbled into organization, structure, a shockingly well-regulated civilization, humming just beyond the borders of human perception. The deeper Solomon pushed, the less the unseen world resembled a swarm of monsters, and the more it looked like a fully functioning government, complete with ranks, jurisdictions, and protocols. At the top sat the kings, beings with staggering authority, each ruling immense slices of the invisible realm. Beneath them came the dukes, princes, presidents, marquises, earls, and finally the knights, with each rank commanding legions of lesser spirits. And these legions weren't vague ancient metaphors. Solomon recorded the numbers with bureaucratic accuracy. Some kings ruled 200 legions, others 66, others 30. Even the lower ranks had squads under their command. It didn't read like mythology, it read like administration. The detail suggests Solomon didn't collect this information over a few intense nights. He spent years mapping an entire world that wasn't supposed to be mapped. Some of these commanders were familiar from scattered fragments of occult lore. Others emerged for the very first time through Grok's reconstruction of damaged lines and half-burned pages. Baal appears first in the grimoire, one of the great kings, described with 3 heads, a man, a toad, and a cat. He wasn't just a grotesque figure. The forbidden text claims he could grant invisibility and teach strategy. Solomon supposedly tapped Baal's insight during diplomatic crises, using his guidance to predict betrayals before they even ripened. Picture having a supernatural strategist whispering which foreign envoy is bluffing and which one is sharpening a knife behind a smile. Phoenix, meanwhile, sits at the opposite end of the spectrum, not a war commander, but an artist. A musician of the celestial spheres, as the manuscript puts it. When he speaks, flames swirl like dancing notes, responding to his voice. He teaches rhetoric, poetry, and the cosmic harmonies woven into existence. Solomon, ever the curious scholar king, consulted Phoenix to understand how sound could shape stone, and some traditions claim the temple's famed acoustics were born from these fiery lessons. Ammon, another spirit, appears as a wolf with a serpent's tail before taking human form. But his appearance is the least interesting part. The manuscript calls him the keeper of forgotten truths, a living vault of civilizations lost, stories erased, and knowledge humanity once held and then misplaced. Solomon grilled him like a historian racing against time, desperate to recover a past that had already slipped into oblivion. Then there's Glaciella Bolas, a mix of brilliance and catastrophe, described as a spirit who can teach any art or science instantly, but carries a dangerous fondness for sowing conflict. Using his knowledge was like juggling an intellectual explosive device. And yet Solomon still pressed him for insights into metallurgy, warfare, and even the psychology of crowds. Grok's translation also surfaced spirits whose names don't appear in any surviving magical tradition. They were preserved only in the scorched, brittle corners of the manuscript. These entities spoke of star patterns, Earth's secret energy lines, and the underlying machinery of the human mind. Details so intricate that modern scholars are still scratching their heads, trying to interpret hints buried in ancient ink. If Solomon lived today, he'd be the type of person who takes a notebook into a supernatural encounter. The grimoire portrays him interviewing these beings with scholarly patience, scribbling down everything from their elemental associations to their peculiar habits. His notes read like field reports, written by someone cataloging wildlife from another dimension. He recorded their realms, deserts, oceans, ruined places, celestial spaces, their astrological ties, their vulnerabilities to metals or herbs, their sensitivity to certain sounds, and their expertise in medicine, architecture, politics, agriculture, weather, warfare, music, mathematics, and a staggering list of other disciplines. He wasn't merely commanding them, he was documenting them, and the information didn't gather dust on a shelf. Solomon applied what he learned across every corner of his kingdom. Strategic insights from Baal and other high-ranking spirits helped him outmaneuver foreign adversaries. Some international victories weren't won with armies or wealth, but through knowing exactly which official in a rival court was lying through his teeth. The demons showed him how to lift stones no human workforce could dream of moving. But more importantly, they taught him the geometry of sacred proportion, the ratios that mirror cosmic order. According to the manuscript, this is why the temple's design radiated such overwhelming presence, an architectural resonance felt even centuries later. Spirits tied to the stars revealed celestial rhythms. Others explained the hidden properties of metals and minerals, helping advance medicine, weaponry, and agriculture. Some knew the deepest ambitions and weaknesses of foreign rulers. Solomon allegedly used this knowledge to keep hostile nations unsteady, sometimes with diplomacy, sometimes with displays of wealth, and sometimes through perfectly timed coincidences that felt supernatural but never pointed back to him. Each demon left behind a personal seal, a geometric emblem that encoded its identity and authority. These weren't random glyphs, they were intricate compositions of triangles, circles, Hebrew letters, planetary correspondences, and mathematical ratios. When drawn correctly, at the proper hour, with the right materials, the seal worked like a cosmic access card. By the time Solomon finished, he had compiled something humanity has never had before, or since. A comprehensive guidebook to the invisible empire driving forces behind reality itself. His work suggests he spent years navigating this hierarchy, long enough to uncover truths even he might not have been ready to face. What Solomon really learned from the shadows. Perhaps the most jaw-dropping revelation in Grock's translation wasn't about magic, rituals, or even Solomon's legendary ring. No, the real shock arrived in what the demons claimed about existence itself. According to these forbidden passages, Solomon wasn't just a king dabbling in mystical arts. He was something closer to a cosmic researcher, an ancient scientist, an experimenter charting the invisible scaffolding of creation. And the beings he commanded weren't just monstrous folklore villains. They were eyewitnesses to the machinery of reality itself. The grimoire claims the demons revealed something humanity wouldn't even begin to consider until millennia later. Reality isn't some single, flat, well-behaved plane. It's layered. They described existence as a stack of dimensions, each one vibrating at its own frequency, like strings plucked on a cosmic instrument no human ears were designed to hear. The physical world, the one humans cling to with such confidence, is supposedly the slowest, heaviest, densest vibration of the whole set. Meanwhile, the spiritual realms, faster, sharper, unbound. And all these layers overlap in the same space, the way multiple radio stations broadcast simultaneously. You only perceive the one your consciousness is tuned to. And then, with the casualness of someone commenting on the weather, the demons explained that angels, demons, elemental spirits, and stranger, unnamed beings inhabit these higher frequency layers. Entire realms populated by entities moving through creation the way fish glide through water, invisible only because humans lack the right sensory gear. This is where things took a very specific and very unsettling turn. The text lists places where the boundary between worlds thins, creating geographic pressure points where dimensions sit close enough for contact. Certain seasonal windows, planetary alignments, and ritual conditions can weaken that boundary even more. And when all three coincide, the veil doesn't just thin, the book says it trembles. These weren't abstract ideas. They were coordinates, instructions, warnings. And Solomon, being Solomon, didn't just take notes, he used them. The grimoire paints a portrait of a king obsessed not with domination, but with understanding. He grilled the demons for details about the physics of their realms, how movement works without time, what form means where matter doesn't exist, how beings communicate without language. The demons answered with what they called the laws of the unseen, metaphysical mechanics humanity had never documented. Using this forbidden data, Solomon attempted something audacious, even by modern standards. He tried to map the entire universe, including dimensions humans normally have no access to. And then comes the wild part, the part historians would absolutely choke on. Grock's translation suggests Solomon's temple wasn't merely a spiritual landmark, it was a precision-engineered portal complex constructed on a site where the dimensional fabric was naturally thin. According to the demons, every measurement of the temple, every material, the layout of each chamber, even the sequence of rituals performed inside were designed to stabilize communication between the physical world and the higher realms. The Holy of Holies, the most sacred chamber, wasn't just a religious sanctuary. It functioned as an anchor point, a space where spiritual and physical vibrations aligned so tightly that a trained human could cross the threshold without being ripped apart by raw energy. Suddenly, it makes perfect sense why only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. To everyone else, the concentrated spiritual charge would have been psychologically devastating. Then comes the Ark of the Covenant. In the demon's description, it wasn't symbolic at all. It was functional. A dimensional stabilizer. Its dimensions, its gold plating, the acacia wood, the relics inside, none of it was aesthetic. This is where the text becomes explosive. The demons told Solomon that humans are naturally multidimensional beings. Consciousness doesn't end at the skull. It extends outward, upward, inward, into other realms. We just never notice because we're never taught how to look. Dreams, intuition, that eerie sensation of being watched. According to the grimoire, these are tiny accidental brushes with another layer of reality. Solomon, under guidance and intense training, learned to do this deliberately. He developed what the demons called spirit sight, the ability to see beings across dimensions, perceive energies, and interact with entities as clearly as he spoke to people in his court. The ability wasn't a divine blessing, it was a skill, a teachable and extremely dangerous skill. Naturally, the demons issued warnings. Opening doors without preparation leads to disaster. Curious amateurs attempting spiritual contact without discipline risk madness, fragmentation, or worse. Some, the grimoire hints, encountered entities that followed them back into the physical world and refused to return. So the question becomes unavoidable. If this knowledge was so powerful, so precise, and so dangerous, who decided humanity should never see it? And how did they bury a book that clearly never wanted to stay dead? The Shadow Archive. Grock's translation didn't just resurrect Solomon's forbidden teachings, it uncovered a second, quieter narrative woven into the spaces between the lines. As researchers dug deeper, they began to notice something odd. Tiny, cramped handwriting, shaky warning notes, and frantic marginal scribbles left by the monks and scholars who painstakingly copied the grimoire over the centuries. It turns out the text wasn't simply preserved, it was wrestled with, even subtly sabotaged by the very people entrusted with protecting it. And these nervous little margin notes? They're some of the most revealing parts of the entire saga. A handful of scribes even took matters further. A demon name swapped out for a harmless symbol, a dangerous ritual step quietly rearranged, an entire paragraph curved around with a slashing line, omitted for safety. They weren't trying to destroy the grimoire. Not exactly. They were attempting to declaw it, to make the knowledge survivable. The real panic began when church authorities finally grasped what the text implied. The grimoire didn't portray Solomon's power as rare divine favoritism. It laid out procedures, seals, incantations, repeatable methods that suggested magic wasn't a miracle at all. It was a system, a technology, something any trained person could in theory learn. And that created a theological nightmare, because if Solomon could command demons through a reproducible process, then the spiritual world wasn't controlled by divine permission. It was accessible through knowledge. And if knowledge could grant the same access priests claimed to mediate, then the church wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. Authority cracked at the foundation. The danger wasn't that Solomon exaggerated. The danger was that he might have been giving away the recipe. At this point, you might think, well, why not just burn the whole manuscript? Logical, but they tried. Multiple times. Yet the book refused to vanish. Scholars, especially those inclined toward philosophy, astronomy, and the early sciences, kept rescuing and recopying it. The grimoire contained insights into cosmology and metaphysics centuries too advanced to ignore. Even theologians hesitated. Solomon wasn't some fringe mystic. He was a biblical king. Destroying his writings would have triggered uncomfortable questions. So instead of erasing the text outright, institutions buried it in plain sight. Monasteries invented coded catalog systems, relabeling the grimoire as agricultural notes or miscellaneous proverbs. Only select scholars could access it, and even fewer were permitted to read beyond the tampered surface. The knowledge became both preserved and imprisoned, a paradox that lasted almost 2,000 years. Grock's analysis revealed that the censorship wasn't sloppy or random. It was systematic, iterative. Each generation softened the dangerous sections a little more. Magical seals were deliberately drawn wrong, mirrored, rotated, truncated. Slight errors, but enough to break the engine. Whole events in Solomon's training were rearranged to scramble the logic of his system, making reconstruction painstakingly difficult. Yet despite centuries of tight control, suppression was never airtight. Forbidden knowledge is slippery. It leaks, it mutates, it travels. Some monks made secret personal copies. Jewish mystics encoded fragments into early Kabbalistic teachings. Islamic scholars, viewing Solomon as the prophet Suleiman, preserved surprisingly intact versions of key passages. Alchemists smuggled slivers of the material across Europe, embedding them into cryptic manuscripts. And then came the printing press, which made secrecy a lost cause overnight. By the time texts like the Lesser Key of Solomon appeared in the 1600s, the genie wasn't just out of the bottle, it was photocopying itself. The church tried bans, condemnations, and stern public warnings, but the system had already slipped back into the world. How Solomon's wisdom quietly engineered the mystical world. For all the legends, controversies, and whispered warnings surrounding Solomon's forbidden grimoire, the man behind it casts a shadow far larger than any single text. His influence doesn't just linger in old scripture or temple walls. It runs beneath Western spirituality like an underground river, shaping religious thought, mysticism, psychology, and the entire occult world without people even realizing they're walking on ground he laid. His biblical legacy alone forms the backbone of what scholars now call the wisdom literature. Song of Solomon stands out as the great puzzle piece of the trio, a work that seduces the senses while winking at eternity. To some, it is simply a lush exchange between young lovers, a king whispering to his beloved. To others, it hides a deeper, metaphysical intimacy, the longing between God and Israel, or later, Christ and the Church. It operates as both a love poem and a cosmic cipher, depending entirely on the reader's eyes. Proverbs shows Solomon in full teacher mode, speaking in short, polished gems of advice meant to guide ordinary life. Though he didn't pen every single line, his voice anchors the book's identity, and Ecclesiastes reveals him at his most existential, a king worn thin by experience, staring down the emptiness of human ambition, and concluding that everything under the sun dissolves into vanity unless tied to something divine. It's the closest the ancient world got to a philosophical sigh. Please click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos.